Virginia.
Madam President, I rise to talk about the FAA Reauthorization Bill that's pending before the Senate now. And I want to begin by thanking the Chair of Commerce, Senator Cantwell, and her ranking member, Senator Cruz, for doing something very important. It is critical that this FAA Reauthorization Bill happen. And as I look at the bill, I see many provisions that I strongly support, and I applaud the committee for their work. In particular, the committee has addressed the critical shortage in air traffic control that is incredibly important to the safety of our skies. And second, the committee dealt with a challenging issue surrounding pilot training hours, and I think came up with a solution that is going to be the right solution. So I begin with, this is a big bill with a lot of provisions, and I find much to like in almost all of it. But I rise to address the one piece of it where I am not supportive, and that is the mandate that the Senate committee version contains to add 5 slots or 10 flights to one of the most delay-prone and congested airports in the United States, Reagan National Airport, otherwise known as DCA. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time going into this issue as the senator representing Virginia, but I stand together with the support of colleagues, the senators from Maryland, Senator Van Hollen, Senator Cardin, the senator from Virginia, Senator Warner. We are filing an amendment to remove the additional slots at DCA in this provision, and I want to just explain why to my colleagues. First, just a word about DCA. Most of us know it, but maybe not all know it and can put it in the context with other airports in this country. DCA is a postage stamp of an airport. It's 860 acres. By comparison, Dulles is built on 12,000 acres. The Denver airport is nearly 30,000 acres. The Dallas airport is, I think, 18,000 acres. The DCA airport was built at a time when air traffic was not so intense, wasn't so normal, wasn't so critical to the nation's economy, and it was built on this small footprint. And everyone who's flown into DCA know there is no way to expand it. You're essentially kind of wrapped around on nearly 3 sides by water, and then on the 4th side, it's US 1 and a rail line. There's no way to make it bigger. DCA has 3 runways. There's a primary runway, the long runway, and then there are 2 commuter runways on this 860 acres. When DCA was built, and more recently as studies have been done, the estimate has been that DCA should, on that footprint with those 3 runways, accommodate 15 million passengers a year in and out of that airport. Where is DCA today? Today, DCA is pressed to the gills, and 25.5 million passengers a year are coming into or out of DCA. And it's pressed in another way. The airport was built so that the 15 million passengers would be spread across the 3 runways, larger planes from farther away on the main runway, and then commuter planes from near distances on the 2 commuter runways. But there have been significant advances in the configuration of airlines, and commuter airplanes that used to be turboprops are now jets. And so what's happened at DCA is 90% of the flights that come into DCA have to use the primary runway, and that number is increasing as the commuter planes change in their configurations. So to just kind of summarize that, a very small airport that was designed for 15.5 million passengers spread across 3 runways is now dealing with a passenger load of 25.5 million passengers, with 90% of those having to land on the main runway. How does that make DCA rank with other airports in the United States? Well, again, because of its small size, there are a number of airports that have more passengers in and out. DCA is the 19th busiest airport in the United States, if you look at the entire airport. But if you look at the main runway at DCA, that main runway is the single busiest runway in the whole U.S. LaGuardia doesn't beat it, Kennedy doesn't beat it, Newark doesn't beat it, LAX doesn't beat it, Atlanta Hartsfield doesn't beat it, This runway that we use in this region is the busiest runway in the United States. What does that mean? What does it mean to have this 25.5 million passengers mostly on one runway at DCA? Well, the first thing it means is very significant delay. Remember, I mentioned that DCA is the 19th busiest airport in the United States, but if you look at the average delay per day, it's number 8. In other words, it punches really far above its weight when it comes to delay. And what kind of delay? You know, a delay of 2 or 3 minutes, I mean, hey, that wouldn't be a problem. But the average delay at DCA, and more than 20% of flights in and out of DCA experience delay, the average delay of those that do is not 10 minutes, it's not 30 minutes, it's not 45 minutes, it's 67 minutes is the average delay on these more than 20% of the flights that come into and out of DCA. How about beyond delay? What other measures? Well, again, I told you that DCA was the 19th busiest airport in the United States, but it's number 3 in canceled flights. Now, some jurisdictions have canceled flights because the weather is horrible. You know, you might expect a lot of cancellations in an Alaska or maybe in a Minneapolis or maybe in a Chicago, the Windy City, with so many flights coming in, you might expect that they would have a lot of cancellations. The problem at DCA isn't weather. The problem is congestion, and number 3 in the country in terms of cancellations. And there's another measure that is a combination of both kind of a delay and safety measure. The number of times, and I think we've all experienced this, if you're flying into DCA that you're put into a routing circle or loop before you can land. Now, that's part of what contributes to the 67 minutes of delay that's experienced by these more than 21% of the planes that have delay, but it also poses some additional challenges. When you are looping a plane over a very restricted DC airspace, as other planes are taking off 1 per minute from 7 a.m. till 11 p.m., taking off or landing 1 per minute, you raise the risk of accident. And you also subject neighborhoods with loop patterns to noise. And that was one of the original controversies that led Congress to decide to take these airports out of the federal control and put them into the control of the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority, the idea that we can manage this better for safety, for convenience, but also to reduce noise in the neighborhoods in the DMV. So delay, cancellation, looping patterns that are both a delay factor and a convenience factor and a neighborhood amenity factor. And that's DCA today. There's another challenge with DCA, and that is with congestion, you run into risks of safety. As we were considering this matter just in the last few weeks, before the FAA bill was pending before Congress, but work had been done in the committees and work had been done in the House, there was a near miss on the runways at DCA. A plane was getting ready to take off on the main runway, a flight to Boston, a JetBlue flight to Boston, and another plane was trying to cross over to one of those shorter commuter runways, and they came within 300 feet of a collision. If you listen to the audio tape, and I can't play tape in the chambers, I wish I could, but I played it for colleagues outside the chamber, you hear this conversation of the air traffic controllers, and I'll tell you, they're the most even-keel, monotone people on the planet Earth. It's just the facts, ma'am, and you never hear emotions in their voice. But in this particular instance, you hear the tension ratcheting up as these two planes are getting closer and closer until you hear, in a frantic and worried way, one of the air traffic controllers just yelling, "Stop, stop," to these two planes because they're about to collide with one another. 300 feet isn't very much. It's not very much. And yet you raise the risk of accident with congestion. I mean, it stands to reason. Auto accidents don't happen as often on roads that aren't congested, but when roads are congested, you run the risk of greater accidents, and that is what is happening at DCA right now before we talk about adding slots. Now, I do appreciate the fact that in this bill, as I've said, one of the things I like is the focus on air traffic controllers, because that's a key part of this. But it just stands to reason that if it's already the busiest runway in the United States, and it's already one of the most delayed airports in the U.S., and it's already near the lead in cancellations and needs of flights to loop around, it is a problem waiting to happen. And I've described this accident in the last 2 weeks as a flashing red warning signal to Congress that please do not add more flights. Don't jam more flights into this busiest runway in the United States. The proposal before the body is to add 10 more flights, what we call 5 slots. It doesn't sound like a lot. I mean, I'll admit, 5 slots doesn't sound like a lot. And maybe in an airport where there wasn't already a severe congestion problem, it wouldn't be a lot. And maybe in an airport that wasn't so small and whose size is already creating safety challenges, it wouldn't be a lot. But at DCA, it is a lot. And so we've asked the FAA, charged with air traffic safety, experts in this, and I'm definitely not an expert, what would 10 more flights mean? And again, 5 slots is each slot is a flight in and a flight out, so 5 slots is 10 flights. What would 10 flights a day mean to DCA? And what the FAA said was, okay, even 1 flight would increase delay in operations at DCA. Even 1 would increase delay in this top 10 most delayed airport in the United States. But 10 flights would add an extra 751 minutes, more than 12 hours, of delay at DCA every day. 751 minutes of delay at DCA every day, and it would likely affect 183 flights. Now, this airport, as I said, is already one of the most delayed in the United States, and if you add that 751 minutes to the average daily delay at DCA, you are now over 12,000 minutes of delay every day at DCA. So DCA would be climbing the ladder. They wouldn't be the 8th most delayed airport. They'd be climbing the ladder and really cement their place in the top 10 or bottom 10, depending on how you would want to look at it. You all know that delay is bad. You don't want to arrive at a location late. Already 67 minutes is the average. It would increase. It doesn't increase by average. Some would increase by a lot, some by a little. But remember that delay also has a compounding effect. If you're late leaving delayed by 67 minutes and then some, then you might miss a connection or two. Or you might cause planes to wait for you, which then delays a whole lot of other people. So in our air traffic system, delay builds on delay, and it's kind of a geometric progression that creates massive inconvenience. The argument that we are making, those of us who are in this region, is we're not on the Commerce Committee. We weren't involved in the negotiation. We made our intentions known. We've made them known for a very long time, and the intentions that we've made known are that this is already an overburdened airport with the busiest runway in the United States, and there are both passenger convenience and safety reasons to not do this. But it's not just us. It's not just us. The FAA has not said do this or don't do it, but the FAA has said if you add even 1 plane, you're going to increase delay at this very delay-prone airport. But there's also another body that is offering us advice. Congress created a board called an authority called the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority during the Reagan administration. I have a personal connection to this story. My father-in-law had been the governor of Virginia and was somewhat of an expert in transportation. And President Reagan's Secretary of Transportation, Liddy Dole, asked him to come and lobby Congress to let go of control of these airports and instead create an authority. My father-in-law, Linwood, died about 2 years ago at age 98, but it was one of his proud moments. And it was hard to convince Congress to give up control of these airports. It was very hard. It was a tough battle, but he eventually did it. And Congress agreed that DCA and Dulles would be operated by the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority, and Congress appoints that board. Certain members have to be from DC, certain from Virginia, certain from Maryland, and certain are federal appointees who can be from anywhere. But we appoint that board and we exercise oversight over that board, and they have responsibility for the safety of these two airports. What are they saying about this proposal? Well, those who are charged with operating these airports every day are saying, don't do this. They're essentially saying the same thing that this air traffic controller is saying, stop, stop. The way to manage this extra congestion and delay and safety danger at DCA is not putting more flights in here. It's taking advantage of more capacity at Dulles and more capacity at BWI. And so my colleagues and I are offering this amendment, recognizing the good work that the committee has done to promote safety throughout this reauthorization bill, but pointing out that in this one instance, the proposal in the bill is directly contrary to the safety of 25 million people who use this airport, is directly contrary to the safety of neighborhoods surrounding this airport, and will take an already overburdened, delay and cancellation-prone airport and make matters much worse. We will do all we can to press for a vote on this amendment to hopefully convince our colleagues to vote with us. And the last thing I say, Madam President, before I sit down is this. The near miss 2 weeks ago is a warning light. We've all been warned. It's rare to have legislation where there's no downside to it. There's always going to be potential downside, and sometimes we can assess what the downside is, and sometimes the downside, we may not be able to assess what it is. There's nothing we can do here that doesn't have a downside. But I've been here for about 12 years now, and I will say this is a piece of legislation unlike any other that I have considered, where the downside has been placed on the table right before us in such a stark way as we are coming up to consider this bill. And I just hope my colleagues will see the warning for what it is, will heed the advice of the FAA, will listen to those that we've empowered to operate this airport. If they're telling us this should not be done, and if it's done, you can increase risk of something bad happen, we should listen to them. We should listen to them. The one last thing I'll mention, because it's often relevant in bills like this, is, well, if we were to make this change and accept the amendment and strip away these 10 additional flights, are we going to cause problems over on the House side? You know, we had this debate about the FAA reauthorization. We have this debate about appropriations bills all the time. Okay, we know the FAA bill reauthorization needs to be done by the end of next week. If we were to strip out the 10 flights, are we going to have problems over on the House side? And the answer to that is no, because the additional slots were only included in the Senate bill. The House considered the same proposal and rejected it in committee. No extra slots jammed into the busiest runway in the United States, none. Now, some didn't like that, and so on the floor of the House, they offered an amendment to add these 5 slots, 10 flights, and the amendment failed. So we know what the will of the body is on the House side already, and that was a vote that took place before this near miss. My surmise is if they were against it before the near miss, they're going to be even more against it after the near miss. And so we needn't worry that if we adjust the bill before us to take this out, that there's going to be a danger on the House side of compromising the bill and causing us to miss the deadline on the reauthorization. And with that, Madam President, I appreciate the attention of the body and yield the floor.